Hello, good morning, and welcome to Fireside Chat number 37, or it's a good evening if you're in the UK, with our special guest, Josh O'Brien. I'm your host, Brian, not O'Brien, Brian. And I'm joined by Mike and Allison, as well as Josh O'Brien. So, first, I just want to say welcome to the show, Josh. Thanks for coming. O'Brien, Brian. And I'm joined by... You gotta mute yourself. I'm talking. Oh my god.
No, that's my bad. Not used to this whole thing.
No, it's okay.
Everyone does it once. Everyone does it once.
And with that, hello everybody.
Some more than once.
I'm inexperienced at this whole live streaming thing, so bear with me. But hello everybody. Nice to be on. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. And before we get into the discussion and the talk, I want to give Allison an opportunity to do some talking about UK stuff. So, Allison, UK stuff.
Okay, yeah. Well, first of all, I wanted to just point out that Josh O'Brien was on the BBC documentary about the men's rights, or no, sorry, MGTOW, men going their own way.
Was it about MGTOW?
I'm pretty sure it was.
The manosphere in general, including.
It was men at war. So it was basically anyone we can paint as being anti-feminist and a bad person.
Including that guy who went to jail for the £10 note, Jane Austen debacle. Nothing to do with the manosphere, just happened to be a dude who went...
Just some random guy.
He just went to jail for something. Okay, yeah. So it's cool that you're coming to talk to us now after talking to the BBC. So.
Oh mate, I get a couple of media requests through every now and then, and I say yes in a heartbeat because I'm attention starved, and I've always got time to come on things like this with the people who actually do all of the big work and make the real things happen. I just get airtime because I'm young. That's basically my whole thing.
Well, it is interesting to know, but you know, I'm getting too far afield starting the interview before we do the shilling. As you may or may not know, if you're listening, we are doing a fundraiser to get the Badgers to Britain. You can go to www.feedthebadger.com, and we're currently at about 3,600, and we need to get to 8,500 to get our basic expenses, and we have a stretch goal of 1,200 or 12,000 to get rewards to the people who've backed us. So if you would go there and throw some shekels in the hat, that would be very, very, very much appreciated, because we really can't go there unless you know we get the shekels. And there are some people who are, I mean, since the last time I did the first day that I did the call out on Thursday or Tuesday, this week, sorry, not last week, there have been many, many more people who have commented upon. So this is from Robert. I've been wanting to help you support you folks for a while now, and I'm finally taking the step. Keep up the good work, and thank you. Well, thank you, Robert, for your donation. It is greatly appreciated. And if you want to join Robert, www.feedthebadger.com. We're also going to be putting together some meetups. We're going to be putting some meetups at the Excel Center in London during the event, which is the 8th to the 10th. And we're also going to have a meetup sometime on Saturday at Newstead Abbey, sort of in the center of your very, very small continent. I guess it's not really a continent, island, something like that. Help me out here.
What?
Landmass?
You may say island. We call it an island when it's important. We will defend this island.
Yeah, I mean the basics of the whole thing. It's a bit of a confusing way of putting it, but yeah, we've left the European Union. We've left a political entity.
But that wasn't. I'm actually talking about the actual landmass. How do you refer to?
Sorry, I'm not paying attention. It wasn't.
It wasn't a.
We're not there yet.
Oh, my bad. I'm ruining this whole. I was tweeting out a link to the thing, and I completely stopped paying attention.
Well, it's an exciting day.
Okay.
It's a very exciting day to be a UKIP supporter.
Join us.
I'm not a member anymore, mate, but we'll get onto that later.
Oh, okay.
All right. Okay. So I'll hand it over to Brian. Take it away.
All right.
I
So
feel like I've derailed everything. So.
It's all right. So the question was, does Great Britain count as an island? Or no?
Yes, Great Britain.
Yeah, it does. I don't think there's any other. We're not a continent, so we must be an island.
The United Kingdom includes a bit of another island, but Great Britain.
Yeah, and well, actually includes quite a few other islands.
For that weird-shaped island is actually called Great Britain. So yes.
All right.
We're not offended by being called an island.
No, we are an island nation. It's fine.
Yeah. And okay, so we're gonna get into the interview, but Bering is watching right now. Bering, don't leave yet. We're not gonna talk about Brexit until later. We'll talk about other stuff first. That way you can like sort of rest your brain from all the intensity.
And also, Bering, where is your video in which you took up the gauntlet that we threw down about the Tim Tam Slam?
You cunt.
Cunt.
Okay. So, and by the way, Tim Tam Slam, pretty fucking awesome, delicious. So Josh, have you ever done a Tim Tam Slam before?
I haven't. No, I can't say I have.
They're the same as penguin bars. So have
Oh,
you ever
well, in that
eaten
case, yes.
in coffee?
No, it's not dipped in coffee. You're not understanding the logistics of the Tim Tam Slam. You have to bite off one end. Okay.
And then you suck the coffee through. Is that the?
Yeah. That's
I've done that. Standard
Yeah.
procedure.
But
So
you've
he
done
has
it with a
done that.
penguin.
Yes, they're penguins here. They've got little jokes on the back. They're quite cool.
Oh, well
Okay.
then.
With Kit Kats. Kit Kats are like designed to be straws. Like there's little
No,
straws.
I actually tried it. After Bering blew my mind with the whole Tim Tam Slam thing, I tried it with a Kit Kat, and it actually does work fairly well.
It's
And you have to
delicious
suck
as well.
harder because it's longer.
There you go. And I'm assuming, Allison, you did that masterfully.
Oh, I'm gonna.
There we go. But yeah, so I guess I'll have to bite the ends off of a penguin when I get to the UK. I never thought I'd ever say that sentence in my life. Achievement.
Yeah,
unlocked.
it's an odd one, but it's definitely worth trying.
Okay, so Josh, people who may not know who you are because you haven't made a video in a while, but so first off, I guess, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I have been doing a channel on this sort of stuff on men's issues. I want to expand it to wider politics, and I've said that for a while, but I just haven't got round to it. For some time now, I mostly get airtime, media requests, get likes and things because I'm saying what everyone else is saying, but I'm saying it from a 19-year-old body, which seems to be quite a big thing for a lot of people. I'm speaking at the International Conference on Men's Issues next month, obviously, on this topic, on young people and their engagement with the men's movement. So that's the sort of area I come from. Although I wouldn't say I'm particularly focused on the youth question in general. I try and take a more general approach to whatever I talk about. But yeah, that's me. And I know I haven't made a video in a while. I'm sorry. I'm lazy and rubbish.
Well, I can't argue with that. Does anybody else, Mike? Do you have an argument against him being lazy and rubbish?
No, I was lazy and rubbish when I was that age. And you made videos in the first place. This dude's been famous for longer than me. He was one of my inspirations. Yeah.
I remember when you were posting your thoughts as comments on my channel.
Yeah.
That was a
That's what I did.
nice time period. Back before you eclipsed me.
Well,
Yeah,
if you go back to making
I have no life.
videos,
I have no life with which to fill with socializing and shit. I just make videos. Plus,
See, that's the worst part is it's not like I'm out every night. I'm sat at my desk going, I should make a video, and then just not.
well, maybe by the time this is over, you'll be inspired to make content.
We can hope.
Yeah. So, how did you find yourself making content on YouTube and elsewhere related to the issues facing men and boys? This is sort of unusual for someone your age. So, like, what made you, like, how did you find yourself making this content? What was it that, got you thinking about doing this stuff?
Well, to be honest, it was sort of a natural progression from all the other things I was thinking about at the time. I've always been, contrarian. I think a lot of us in the movement have been. I always used to I didn't like to believe something just because I was told it by a teacher. And the overwhelming message you get throughout schooling, at least here in Britain, is men bad, women good. And I instinctively rejected that. And there were a lot of other people that I was watching on YouTube and reading who were talking not about this issue or these issues in particular, but about a wider spectrum of issues that included this. So the main one that I usually credit as getting me into this sort of thing was The Amazing Atheist. Not because he was particularly focused on feminism or on men's issues, and he still isn't, but because he happened to make one or two videos that focused on that area, and it was enough to spark off the interest and get me looking. And once I sort of knew enough of the facts, it got to a point where I don't think I could have let myself not make videos. I couldn't. I mean, I don't think I could have just left the issues there and not tried to do something about them.
Yeah. And when you say that the Amazing Atheist made a couple of videos, one of the ones that jumped into my mind was he made a response to The View when they were talking about, I think it was The View, where they were talking about the Sharon Osbourne was talking about the guy's penis that got cut off and put in the garbage disposal, and TJ made a response to that. Would that have been maybe one of the videos? Do you remember that video?
I know the video you're talking about. I think it was earlier than that I was watching this sort of thing. I honestly couldn't tell you a particular video or a particular couple of videos. I could only say that he's got a couple out there that are on the general topic. I don't really watch The Amazing Atheist that much anymore. I don't watch a lot of the people I used to, but you know, I've got to credit them for at least sparking off the interest to get more involved.
Yeah, I get that. And does this also apply to, you know, I noticed that you also made a lot of videos or you were doing a lot of discussions about your libertarian values. You've been on discussions with Goodfella, you've had, have been on with that guy T, and you were talking about that. Is this sort of like how you, how did you find this as well? Was this part of the same sort of collective, you know, goal, like where you ended up in terms of your thinking?
Well, I think both my views on the gender stuff and my views on the wider political issues came in part from this sort of impulse to go against the grain and go against the sort of accepted wisdom, which is, you know, government good, women good, men bad, freedom bad. And that gave me enough to get looking. And I don't know, from there, I studied politics and sociology at A level, and I'm now studying them at university level. So that helped me to refine a vague sense of unease with the status quo into an actual belief system. And so, yeah, I do think the two are linked, because I think in order to be either a libertarian or a men's advocate of some kind, you have to be comfortable saying, I don't care what people think, I'm going to look at what's actually true. And I think that mindset is conducive to both ideologies, even if it doesn't necessarily guarantee total crossover.
So somebody wanted to ask this in the chat. NC Clark asked about the documentary. So recently we saw you.
Cough, hit piece. Cough, cough.
Yeah. Recently we saw you on a BBC special about the manosphere. Have you had a chance to see that they're there? Because like the way this usually works is, right, you get interviewed, and then it goes to the editing floor, and who knows what happens after that, right? So
yeah, that's a fair description of it. This isn't the first BBC project I've been in, although it's the first I've been in for any length of time. Last November, or the November before it must have been, I filmed a little bit for another BBC Three documentary with Mike Buchanan from Justice for Men and Boys. And I was basically told by the BBC before this one. I think the first one is probably a more egregious example of a hit piece. I was actually told before that, you know, they approached me, they said, you know, we like the fact you're a young person talking about these issues, we think you're intelligent, we like to hear what you have to say, we'd like to interview you. And I was like, cool. And they said, so do you actually go out and campaign? And because I don't go out and protest and I'm not, you know, getting signatures for a petition, they didn't have anything they could film that would be interesting. So they said, basically, film yourself giving out leaflets with Justice for Men and Boys, film as if you're part of Justice for Men and Boys, or we won't feature you. And, you know, I have no problem with Mike, I have no problem with J for MB. I'm not a member, I'm not in any official capacity associated with them. I try and steer clear of officially associating with any group at the moment, but I was happy to be part of what they were doing. They were and are the only political party in the UK that's primarily concerned with these issues, so I was happy to do that. And this was better than the first one, I should say, and I think certainly from the crew that I met, there was a definite sense in this second documentary, far more of them actually wanting to listen. I think Reggie, as a presenter, was a lot more interested in what I had to say and a lot more willing to actually listen to what I had to say than the presenter of the last one, Tiger Drew Honey. But at the end of the day, yeah, they took a lot of filming and cut it down to a very short amount. I filmed on two separate days with them. Firstly, I went to Hyde Park and I gave a speech. Again, this is another example of where the BBC tries to put me in a group. So there were a couple of other guys at the Speaker's Corner, some of whom will be at the conference, And, you know, they're great guys, and, you know, I'm perfectly happy to speak alongside them. I have no problem with it. But I'm not part of their community. You know, they do this sort of regularly, whereas this was the first time and probably last time I've ever done it. So I was happy to go and film with them, but, you know, it wasn't what I had planned to do. But I went and I gave a speech, and actually, it went really well. I got a really overwhelmingly positive response. I had one heckler the second time I gave the speech, and other than that, it was an overwhelming positive response, especially from a lot of girls in the audience who came over and were asking me for statistics and asking me for citations and were really engaging. Obviously, none of that was shown. But we filmed there, and then we also did an interview at my house and another interview with two of my friends as well as myself at a local pub. The idea being to show me as a real person rather than just some weirdo sat in his room alone. Of course, all of that was cut out as well. And then they coupled that by intercutting me with lots of people I have no association with, like Roosh V, and also intercutting it with the most cherry-picked clip of my video they could find. And to my own credit, I think, the most cherry-picked thing they could find of me saying was, we need to stop talking about rape with emotion and start focusing on the realities and the logic, which I'm happy to stand by. So even out of context, it couldn't make me sound that bad. But I think they focused, in the first one, it was more... They focused heavily on Mike being an evil sexist for various reasons, and then I was just some kid that was also there. In this one, they seemed very clearly to be trying to go with the idea that I wasn't necessarily a sexist, but that I was just taking in what everyone was telling me and not doing any real thinking of my own.
Right.
And I remember a couple of the tweets I saw as a response said things like, he's an intelligent young man who has no idea what he's talking about, which I've always liked.
Yeah, essentially taking the fact that you're a young man and concern trolling on it. That's what what's the guy? Was his name Reggie or Russell or something? The interviewee.
Reggie, yeah.
Yeah, and he was saying, it's so strange. He seems like a bright young man, but I'm worried about his future, and he's associating himself with these terrible ideas, and he could go down the wrong path, or he would say things like,
no one's the real misogynist. The real misogynists are always the men over there in the next room.
Yeah,
pulling the strings somehow. You can never actually find the people who are real misogynists, can you? It's weird that.
Or you can, but they don't call themselves MRAs. They're all off being pickup artists and writing articles about how much they hate MRAs.
Yeah,
indeed.
So I guess, it would seem to me that you did see the actual finished cut. How much time was there between the recording and then, like, the actual release of the BBC special? Do you know about?
I honestly, a couple of months, I think it was. It was a lot shorter than the first one, and they kept me a lot more updated. I'd have to say that, to the credit of, I can't remember the production company this one. I think it was Sundog Productions. Either way, to the credit of this company and to the credit of the people involved, they, made me feel like I was actually being listened to. They paid for my travel when I needed it. They were flexible on when they'd film. I don't feel like there was any malice in anything they did. I think any malice will have come from high up in the BBC. It will have come from the editor and the producer, rather than from the cameraman and the presenter and the people I actually met and was given one-to-one contact with. I think were really nice guys, and I don't think any of them could be blamed for anything that went wrong with my portrayal.
All right. So what have you been like? Okay, so you're going to be speaking at the ICMI in a couple weeks, right? And without giving anything away, because we want to, we're going to leave this actual talk for when the time comes. What have you been up to lately that sort of led up to this point where you're going to the ICMI? So basically, from the time that we stopped seeing your presence on the internet in the form of YouTube videos to the point where you're going to be appearing at the ICMI, what have you been up to?
Much of the same. I've still been reading about this stuff. I post quite frequently, or repost things quite frequently on the Tumblr blog I run. I've also pretty much been tweeting consistently, like dozens of times a day, this entire process. So I have been active. It's just the video making process for me is quite long, especially with my new broken camera and all of the various technical issues that seem determined to pop up. I mean, I'm literally, the only recording equipment I currently possess is my microphone. Other than that, I'm like shit out of luck, essentially. Even my phone doesn't record video anymore. It's that screwed. So the whole process of making videos is quite long, quite difficult, and I absolutely hate editing with a passion, and that has kept me from doing the long-form pieces. But I've written a lot, I've been tweeting a lot, and I've been having a lot of one-to-one conversations with people. I was interviewed by a journalism graduate student for a piece she did. I have been featured in a couple of different media things, and I've generally been keeping myself active while not making anything anyone else wants to see, unfortunately. But I am trying to get back into it. As soon as I can get technical issues sorted out and things of that nature, I'll do my best to get back on your screens.
So then you will cease being lazy and rubbish, is what you're saying.
That is the goal, at least. Although, at the same time as I'm trying to stop being lazy and rubbish with videos, I'm also getting a job and doing all these other real-world things that are going to get in the way. But I'm going to do my best to get a video out as often as possible in the coming weeks.
Well, we're hoping to be there in a couple of weeks, and I want to know, are you of the legal age to drink yet, Josh?
I am, yeah. I'm 19, so...
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. It's 19?
But here...
Oh. That's awesome.
So is this a lead up to inviting him to go on the pub crawl on Sunday?
Yeah, we're gonna go on a pub crawl, Josh. You should come with us. And
as long as Mike is okay with arranging that, which I think basically just amounts to saying like, let's meet at that statue in Excel with the toes, and then there's like this statue with toes.
Mike, what's the statue with the toes? What are they?
That's a descriptive feature of a statue.
Yeah, but it's like a huge...
Do all the other statues not have toes? Is that how we...
Maybe they're wearing shoes in the other ones.
Okay, I'm going to find a picture. And
they're all
show you all.
Every other statue's in a wheelchair.
No, it's not. It's like they have really big toes. It's a statue with really big toes.
Okay.
Ableist statue.
I'm gonna
be ableist.
Yeah, they're discriminating against the lesser abled statues here.
Well, the point is that we're gonna have like a pub crawl. We're gonna start somewhere in Excel where we have a landmark that we can point to.
Yes.
And then I guess we'll have to rely on Mike.
Yeah. And you or Buchanan. I'm hoping that Mike Buchanan will come with. I'd like to hang out with him drunk.
I think that could be a good time.
Is he ever sober?
I'll definitely throw my hat into the ring there.
Yeah, no, I think we should get Mike Buchanan. Maybe he can make some calls and get Devin Farage to come with, just because I want to see that smile. But anywho, so we're gonna go on a pub crawl. So maybe because you guys are apparently more lax with your drinking laws, like age of legal age to drink laws than we are here in the States, which is weird. Like you can be by the time you're 20 years old. You can be in a porno, but you can't watch your own porno. It's weird. Anyway.
Or drink.
While watching your own porno. But anywho, while Allison is looking that up, I guess we're going to have to address the lion in the room and get your thoughts on Brexit. So what...
Bear in mind, people have come to this stream because all the other streams are about Brexit, so keep it brief.
I'll try and keep my thoughts as brief as possible and keep away from boring all the people from the US who don't care and all the people from the UK who just want to break from it.
I think there's a lot of people in the US that watch us that either they're pretty involved or maybe they haven't been following it super closely because they don't know, that it may affect them. I think it will, this kind of thing. So. And since you're here and you normally talk about libertarian stuff, let's hear it. What are your thoughts on Brexit?
Well, I've been a vocal supporter of leaving the European Union since I was old enough to know what the European Union was. It has been for its pretty much since it moved away from just being a trading bloc, it has become a political union that is not just but anti-democratic at its very core, and it. Essentially, the main issue for me personally was that it robbed the British citizens of the right to vote for and remove the people who made the laws they lived under. And there are a lot of other arguments that have come as a part of that, as over-regulation. The fishing industry in this country, for example, was absolutely decimated by the Common Fisheries Policy, which, among other things, dictates that British fishermen had to dump out if they caught more fish than they were assigned. Of British waters, 20% around of British fish were allowed to be caught by British fishermen. If you caught more than that, you had to throw them back, which meant we were buying fish from Spanish fishermen who caught the fish in our waters. And there was also, along with that, the EU was paying people with British taxpayers' money, because we were net contributors, to burn their boats and quit fishing. So, there are a lot of other attendant issues. Obviously, immigration is one of the big ones, the economy. But for me, it was all about making sure that the British people could vote for and remove the people who made their laws. And as a libertarian, when in doubt, the smallest political system is the best political system. And the UK government's a lot smaller and a lot easier to break down than the EU government.
Nothing about money, folks. Did you hear that? Not a word about the fucking money.
For me, the money wasn't part of it. But actually, speaking of the money, I'll quickly give a mention to the market. So, firstly, the FTSE is up compared to the start of last week. So that should show to at least everyone that the markets aren't a true predictor of guaranteed economic future. There's also the fact that a lot of people will be changing their investments and moving their investments around now purely because they invested assuming one thing was going to happen and now another thing has happened. Not to say necessarily that one of those things would be better or worse, just that you take different precautions for different outcomes. And there's also the consideration that today the FTSE closed about 3% down on where it was yesterday, whereas the Spanish, Italian, and pretty much every other European market finished way more than that down. The Spanish market was, I believe, 12.35 or 12.48% down, and the Italian was whichever one of those the Spanish one wasn't. So far, it's too early to tell when it comes to economics, but it was never about economics for me, and I've said from the start, better to be a poor freeman than a rich slave. I've always said, I said, actually, in the lead-up to the referendum, that if you came to me with a button and said, press this button, we'll leave the EU immediately, but you will die on the spot, I said I'd still press that button, because it's important that the next generation and the generation after that actually get to be in charge of their own country.
Yeah. What would you rather live in, a metropolitan Big Brother state or grass huts? I'm going with grass huts. I don't care how rich those fuckers are.
Exactly.
All right, that's a great point. I can't follow that. Okay. What about the claims that people who the only arguments I've seen against it, for Remain, and I'm not saying they're the only ones, but the ones that seem to be the most popular are essentially the same old sort of song and dance you've heard before, where people who want to exit are racist, xenophobic, or otherwise terrible people. Where does that? I mean, that obviously it holds no water, but how does someone even come to that conclusion?
Well, it basically comes down to, in large part, the fact that the immigration question has been one you're not allowed to ask in Britain for a long time. For quite some time now, the cultural left has dominated our institutions to the point where expressing criticism of immigration or mass immigration, whether good criticism or bad criticism, irrelevant, has been tarred as xenophobia and racism, and you're a bad person because you actually care about how many people come into this country, where they come from, and what they do when they get here. But another big part of it comes from the personalities on the Leave side, and one thing that won't make a lot of sense to people who aren't well versed in British politics is the UKIP Conservative Party divide, and the fact there were two competing Leave campaigns. Unlike the Remain campaign, which just had Britain Stronger in Europe, the Leave campaign had Vote Leave, who got the official designation, and they were establishment politicians, people, MPs, people with a lot of clout, people who are established within the political system, whereas Grassroots Out and Leave.eu were led by Nigel Farage, who's part of an insurgent party who won 4 million votes at the last general election but only got one seat of power because our system is absolutely screwed to the rafters. And essentially, Nigel Farage and UKIP and Grassroots Out focused very heavily, and have done since time immemorial, on the immigration question, on the question of, while we're in the EU, we cannot control EU migration. If we leave, we can. And that led to a lot of controversial things. So there was one poster, which is the big one, of it was a photo of a queue of refugees. Although you say refugees, there's a dispute over how many of them actually are refugees. But regardless, a queue of them, and the poster said something like "breaking point." Our services can't cope, and it was essentially the argument that Britain's infrastructure can't cope with a massive influx of people at a massive speed. And whether or not you agree with it, a lot of people said that's an evil, racist way of looking at things, and as a result, the Leave campaign's racist. But they miss out in that even if Nigel Farage's campaign was racist, he was not part of the official Leave campaign. He did not get the designation. He was in as sidelined as he could have been with the amount of political clout he has as a person. If the Vote Leave, if the official Leave campaign could have pushed Nigel Farage any further to the side, they would have done. And whether that's a good idea or a bad idea is up for discussion, because he does appeal quite a lot to people that the Conservative Party doesn't appeal to at all, like traditional working class Labour voters. But yeah, it comes mostly from the fact that this was in every single way an exercise in the silent majority destroying the elites, because Brexit was warned against by everybody who's anybody. Obama came out to warn us against it. The Bank of England, which is meant to be a politically neutral entity, came out to warn us against it. The Treasury, the government, the Labour Party, the Lib Dems, the Greens, everyone was coming out against it and saying, don't do this, it's a bad idea. And I think the British people came to the conclusion that these people were fighting solely for their own interests and not for the interests of Britain. And that's why we've got the result we have.
It's good.
And it's a victory despite the media message, by the way. All over the fucking TV and all over the papers and everywhere, they've been hounding us to vote Remain. The only things telling us to vote Leave have been the leaflets that the grassroots people have put through our letterboxes, and still Leave managed to win, despite all that.
Towards the end of the campaign, there were a few bigger names. The Telegraph came out for Leave, as did The Spectator, which is, in my opinion, the best British politics journalism in existence. So a couple of bigger names came out towards the end. But yeah, generally, the media perception and the media presentation of this has been of leaving the EU as a fringe ideology held by a couple of maniacs, and that's been resoundingly proven to be wrong. It all comes down to the fact that the political class of this country, in large part due to the fact that EU allowed them to isolate themselves, has become isolated from the actual demographics they're meant to be representing.
All right.
We have a question from NC Clark. So what's going to happen to Scotland? I heard they want to stay in the EU. Not to belabor this point, but maybe we can answer it quickly.
They also wanted to stay in the UK.
Yeah.
they wanted to stay in the UK.
Not long ago as well. This question is, you've got to remember that the desire for Scotland to leave the UK is almost entirely manufactured by the Scottish Nationalist Party. There was no massive pro-independence sentiment before the SNP started getting loud, and there isn't one now. The independence campaign was an example of what can be achieved if you get the young on your side. And that's the only reason it came anywhere close to happening, was because, they told the young people to paint Scottish flags on their faces and shout freedom, and that was very persuasive to the Scottish identity, because a large part of the Scottish identity in this country is feeling belaboured by the English. But at the end of the day, the Scots voted to stay in the EU, to stay in the UK, sorry. That's what they voted for, and there seems to be this assumption that people who wanted to remain in the EU would rather be in the EU than the UK, and it's just, that question wasn't being asked. The question was, do you think the UK as a whole should stay in the EU? Not, do you think Scotland specifically should? And the answer to those questions is going to be different, because Scotland as an independent country in the EU is an entirely different proposition from Scotland as part of the UK in the EU. And will there be a second referendum? I don't think so, and I don't really care. If the Scots want to sacrifice their sovereignty and their independence, put up a wall between them and us, and join the EU and the Euro and Schengen, it's only them that are going to suffer. England is paying for Scotland's taxes. The Barnett formula means that their net drains on our treasury. So if anything, England benefits from it. So if they want to suffer, they can suffer.
All right.
Okay. There's another the question from chat I put through. Did you want to answer that?
Yeah, I can ask that one. What is the opinion of the backlash of Nigel saying, quote, "We won without a single bullet fired," completely forgetting about Cox?
Right, so this is an example of the Remain campaign's propaganda. So Jo Cox was a Labour MP who was pro-European Union, pro-refugee, pro-everything that the working class population she's supposed to represent are anti, and she was murdered, unfortunately and horrifically, in her constituency about a week before the referendum by a man who has a recognised history of mental illness and also has a recognised history of affiliation with white nationalist, white supremacist groups, such as, I can't think of one off the top of my head apart from Britain First, who are the fringe of the fringe of the fringe of British politics. And they've got a lot of Facebook followers, but that's because they have a very clever social media strategy. In reality, Britain First get about 3 people out to any rally they have. You know, they're not even anywhere near the BNP, who were still weak and powerless. The UK's political culture is far too moderate for actual racists to gain any power. But because the racists happen to be pro-Brexit, it's not a relevant distinction. You know, the Leave campaign was not racist, but some racists were pro-Leave. And one of these pro-Leave racists, who was also mentally ill, killed someone who was pro-Remain, and it's being painted as though that was the Leave campaign's fault, when it wasn't. You know, the Leave campaign had nothing to do with Thomas Mayer. No one in the Leave campaign knew him beforehand, and no one had anything to do with him. You know, he was just some random maniac who attacked an innocent woman and killed her. And as sad as that is, it doesn't mean anything for the wider system and for the wider populace.
I always am baffled by attribution of responsibility, because if you have an ideology, for example, that says kill all X, then people in that ideology go out and kill somebody of the X persuasion, X being any variable. It seems to be that we often will excuse them depending on what ideology they are part of. And yet, if somebody who with a history of mental illness, who has an interest in a particular political standpoint, does it, then automatically that political standpoint is responsible. I just always found that interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to laugh my arse off when someone tries to assassinate Trump, and everyone on the Remain campaign goes, oh, well, Trump had it coming.
Oh yeah. Now it's okay to try and kill in favour of your ideology. But I think I just want to quickly make another point that at the end of the day, the worst ideology you could have attributed his killing to was leaving the EU, because it wasn't a question about immigration. You know, it wasn't a referendum on should we have immigration. It wasn't a referendum on should we have regulation. It was a referendum on who makes that decision. And that means you're going to get people from across the spectrum. You know, there are people like die-hard socialists, like Dennis Skinner in the Labour Party, he has been the most socialist man in the Labour Party, apart from a couple of others like Tony Benn and Jeremy Corbyn. Since he joined, he has resolutely been as left-wing as you can get. He is not a racist. He is not in any way responsible for Britain First's radicalisation of Tommy Mayer. He had nothing to do with it, and nor did the mainstream Conservative Party. You know, people who think the mainstream Conservative Party in the Vote Leave campaign that was pretty much entirely run from Conservative Party HQ, to try and paint that as having anything to do with Britain First is to completely miss what people were voting on. Only 1/3 of people who voted to leave the European Union listed immigration as their top reason. You know, so it's a minority of a minority of a minority that were even concerned about immigration primarily, and an even smaller minority of them that were violent, radical, or racist. And it's absurd to try and paint it as being part of the wider whole.
It's the equivalent of finding an anti-PUA who murdered some people and saying he's an MRA. Yeah.
It really is. Because he's male, he's from the manosphere, therefore he is part of the MRA movement. It's the exact same thing, really.
Are we talking about the Supreme Gentleman again? Elliot Rodger is a good example of that. Or when the guy attacked the Planned Parenthood, people said, "Oh, this is, you know, essentially the Republicans or the right wing because this man did this thing," who was clearly disturbed. Or Dylan Roof, when he went to that church.
Just like being pro-life is a broad church, it does encompass hateful, bigoted, fundamentalist, conservative Christians, but it also includes a wide variety of people across the spectrum, and it sort of comes down to people always want to pick the least attractive part of whatever they're fighting and pretend it's the whole, and that is what this comes down to.
Do we want to? Because I found it.
Okay, so let me share this
Maybe we can get an explanation from the British
So
people.
this is the sculpture that Allison's talking about with the toes. So it's actually, I was expecting, because for some reason when I think of sculptures like statues in England, I think of like, you know.
I think you have to give me control so I can screen share.
Yeah. I clicked on your name, but it didn't. What the?
Yeah, no, I don't know what's going on with this.
Incidentally, I would not expect anyone to explain the art sculptures put up in their city centres. Nobody can. That's the point of these massive.
Yeah, like I boggle at the stuff put up in Calgary. I don't think it's started to happen here in Saskatchewan yet, but definitely there's some weird stuff going on in Calgary. Just give me control, dude.
I don't have the. Wait, it's not letting me do it. Like there should be a button or something. And
no, it's just in the drop-down menu. You just select my name.
It appears to be presenting on the screen.
Oh, there it is. There it is. Share controls. All right.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now I'm gonna do this. There you go. And notice the size of the statue. Notice the toes. Where is this? Because I noticed I was just looking around Excel using the street view. Did either you, Josh, or Mike recognize this entity?
No idea.
It's right by the river, so you can probably find it that way. But
yeah, is it? And if you're in Britain, or if you live there, is this a good place to like meet up if we're doing like the convention is at the Excel Center?
I imagine it's very expensive around that area because you know they know they're trapping like people.
Yeah, but just to meet up and then get somewhere else, essentially.
I mean, it looks fairly big and hard to miss, but I've not been in this area of London, so I couldn't possibly say.
Yeah, I'm just curious because I was gonna say just let's meet by the gigantic toes on your wharf, and that might work.
But I'm gonna repeat that sentence as though it does.
Okay, but yeah, I'm not even sure if this will work, but you know, it's sort of fly by your seat of your pants. But okay, it's a little baffling. Anyway, if you guys have a better place to meet up, you know, tell me. By the way, why did you British people name your events building after a spreadsheet program?
The Excel.
All the other names are taken.
I don't know. The word center was already a thing, probably.
Also, it is in fact a verb.
Excel.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, that's excellent. But so anyway.
That's excellent. Yes. Well done.
Oh, I see
the connection there.
Yeah.
When you excel, you are excellent.
Okay.
We learned a thing about language.
Well, maybe Spinosaurus can help us out too if he's listening.
Or
he's gonna be there.
Hey,
or
Arbiter of Truth. Tell me more.
Yes, Arbiter of Truth. Tell me more.
Yeah. So anyway, the whole concept is we want to meet somewhere to do a pub crawl. And we need a place to meet. Now, this is by the Excel Center, but as Mike pointed out, it's probably pretty expensive there, so I suggest another place.
It would be expensive throughout most of London, but particularly around the well, not even tourist trappy areas, like business tourist trappy areas, which would be even worse. I think it's around the sort of Canary Wharfy sort of.
Yeah, around the sort of the city areas, the places where all the rich people are, essentially.
We could go into central London, which is just as expensive because it's a tourist trap, but it's where all the nice things are, you know.
Yeah. Well, let's all get on a night bus to Hackney and go on a pub crawl there. Some of us might get stabbed, but the beer will be cheap.
I'm just expanding this so you all know, every single one of you who laughed at me, how the fuck else would you describe this statue?
No, fair enough. I would probably describe it as a statue with the massive feet.
Yeah.
If I was walking past it, I'd probably say, "Wow, those are some massive toes." But then I'd look up and go, "Oh, there's the rest of the Colossus."
Yeah, but the thing is that it doesn't seem to be. It seems to be mostly toes. Like if you go back, see, the toes are actually probably like the largest part of it. Look at that. That's totally out of proportion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the rest of it is all just abstract shapes. The toes are the only recognizable feature of it, besides the fact it's holding.
No, I think it has a hand here. It has a hand and a hammer, and I think it has a face.
I think that's a truncheon. And
fucking
it looks like a rock hammer.
Yeah. Well, you know what they say about statues with big feet? They usually don't make a lot of sense in terms of proportions.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna close up now. I've derailed this enough.
So Josh, it seems like you do have a lot of strong opinions about Brexit and stuff. You should probably make some videos about that.
Yeah, I probably should. And I scripted about 4 videos about it before the vote happened, and that is how rubbish I am. That even though I have scripts on my PC on why we should leave and on why, you know, the media hype's overblown and all that stuff, I just didn't actually get any of it recorded because I am useless.
Oh. Did you vote?
Having trouble with the muting there. Yeah, no, I did go to vote, yeah.
Okay.
I had a mate drop me off specifically.
I'm curious, what does do you talk to your family about the stuff that you do? Dealing with the rights of men and boys and all of that, your politics?
It's a question everybody asks, and it's a question everybody's disappointed with. No. I've spoken to my uncle in some detail about it, because we're quite close. And I've spoken to my grandpa in some detail about it, because we're quite close. But beyond those two, I'm not that close with the rest of my family, to the point that we don't really talk about what's going on in our own lives unless it affects each other. So my parents are aware of what I do, and, you know, when we have discussed it, they are in broad agreement with the wider points, but my parents are not politically active people, they're not politically engaged people, and they don't watch my videos or anything. So, no, I don't really speak about it with them, but when I do, they are in broad agreement. But I find when I speak to most people, they're in broad agreement with the wider themes, at least, of what I'm saying. Yeah.
And when you introduce these sorts of topics, specifically stuff dealing with the issues facing men and boys, with the men's rights stuff, how do you approach talking to people that either you don't believe they know anything about it, like they're normies, or they might even be against it, like they might be feminists?
Well, that's actually, I have got a video scripted to talk quite about this specific thing that I have been planning on making for a little while. It's one of the reasons I don't actually describe myself as an MRA or a men's rights activist or a men's rights advocate. I never have. I use the term men's advocate. And the reason I use that term, basically, is that I think the term MRA is too stigmatized. And I find that if I go into a conversation with someone, whether they call themselves a feminist or not, if I tell them I'm a men's rights activist, they're instinctively anti. They hear that and they think there's something bad about it. They go, they're on ready to go, ready to fight from day one. Whereas if I actually go in and I say, yeah, I'm a men's advocate, I address issues faced by men and boys, and then I give some examples, they tend to be a lot more willing to listen. And that's another reason why, and this is what I'm going to talk about in more detail in the video, so I won't, bore you with it now when it's going to come out. But basically, I've decided to stop calling myself an anti-feminist and prefer to use the term non-feminist, because again, I think all it does is put me at opposites with people who would otherwise listen to what I've got to say.
Presumably, these are all just answers to questions that only come up if the question comes up. You don't have to go straight in saying, "Hi, my name's Josh, and I'm a non-feminist and a men's advocate."
No, of course. I don't really
wait until they ask you what.
Say I'm a men's advocate usually because people ask me to introduce myself. But no, generally I don't jump at the chance to label myself anyway. But if pushed for a label, I tend to stick to ones that aren't stigmatized. There's no stigma associated with saying I'm not a feminist because the majority of people are not feminist, and there's no real stigma with the term men's advocate because I'm the only person who really uses it. So it's part of the same reason I'm not joining any groups and I'm not actually becoming part of any group. I'm happy to work with anybody to achieve better circumstances for men and boys and for the world, but I don't want to actually embed myself into a group where other people's actions get used to beat me and my actions get used to beat other people. I don't want people saying, Josh O'Brien believes this, therefore this group or that group believe it, and I don't want people saying the opposite either.
Okay. But and that where the stigma around MRAs, do you believe that they came out of the MRM, or do you think that that's more a product of the way the media has represented the MRM?
Well, it's obviously in most part down to media propaganda. But the thing that we have to realize is the vast majority of people from any political persuasion are good people who genuinely want what they think is best for the world. And once you sort of accept that, what people call themselves and the stigma associated with it becomes a lot less important, in my view, because, at the end of the day, most people I've spoken to who call themselves MRAs have been perfectly nice people who genuinely want the best possible world, not just for men and boys, but also for women and girls, but who are prioritising men and boys issues for any number of reasons. And the same is true for the majority of people I've spoken to who have identified as feminists. And as a result, I generally just try to ignore what stigma I can, except where I see a good cause for it. So I think the stigma around the term feminist, much more so than the stigma around the term MRA, has come out of the actions of its advocates. But I don't think that either of them could be said to be solely down to one or the other.
Yeah, that's a good way to go. I mean, at some point you'll get asked the question, what are you? And one way to go is my favourite way is, why are you asking that question? What are you loading into that question? Because I'm Larry like that. But it's just as viable to actually...
Whenever someone asks you to label yourself, it's because they don't want to engage with the substance of what you're saying. They want to either write you off as, he agrees with me, don't have to speak to him, or he disagrees with me, don't have to speak to him. You know, people who are concerned with what you call yourself rather than what you're actually saying are not people that I have any time for.
Yeah, don't make it about the label, I think, is advice I would give to anyone and accept from anyone. And beware of anyone who does make it about the label. You can have to shy away from labels, and you don't have to adopt them. Just be aware of those who fuck around with that sort of thing.
Yeah, fair enough. So, do you have any future plans, Josh, related to your political goals after the ICMI? What's next? What are you looking at?
What's next? So far, all I've got really planned out is more of the same. I've been having conversations over Twitter with someone from Russia today who's asked if she can arrange to do some talking about something or other related to men's issues, so I'll probably be doing that in the near future, and obviously I'll put all the details out on all the various channels. But yeah, it's really just more of the same. I don't have any... I'm not starting any groups or institutions. I've got the vague idea in the back of my head that some point in the future I'd quite like to start a men's issues think tank or be part of one, but at the age of 19, there's not much I can do in the practical political sphere on my own, and so I view my goals at the moment as being, getting people to hear what I've got to say and taking on board whatever they suggest as the next move, really.
Okay. And what about are you in college right now?
Yeah, I'm at my first year of I've just finished my first year of university.
Wow.
I'll be going back to the second year in September.
Those were the days. And what are you majoring in? What kind of class are you getting involved with?
Politics and sociology. So nice and relevant.
Sociology? Are you going to be bracing yourself for any sort of rub jimmies the wrong way? Because when I was in college not long ago, I took a few social soft science classes, and I ended up getting into lots of debates with the ethics teachers and the speech teachers and the sociology teachers about stuff like this, about feminism and this Marxist thing. I mean, there was literally Marxism being taught in my class, like specifically the cultural Marxism stuff, and I ended up getting into big debates with people, and I managed to pass because I held my tongue a little bit, but I don't know. So anyway, go ahead.
Well, I mean, the first thing I'm reminded of is Ben Shapiro has quite a good video about how to argue with, he calls it tips for dealing with a liberal, I think, but in reality it's more how to argue with anyone from the regressive left would be probably the more modern way of phrasing it, and it's quite a good video in general, and one bit he says is his advice to college students is, thank God for blue books, write like a communist. Don't let anyone write for all of your exams as if you completely agree with all of their stuff, because they're going to mark you down if you don't. And I cannot bring myself to take that advice. I never have been able to keep my tongue. And as a result, I have been writing as if I am me, and so far it's done me quite well, although I haven't been attending the vast majority of my lectures because they are uninteresting and irrelevant to the actual assessed work, and so I haven't had a chance to rustle any jimmies because I haven't met anyone I study with.
Well, prepare yourself and have fun, because it will be.
Thanks.
All right. Well, I don't have any more questions. Josh, is there anything that you want to say that we didn't get a chance to ask you about, or any questions you have for us?
I'd like to once again say I'm going to be speaking at ICME. Please come see me. You know, I can't promise anything, but I can promise I'll be working on the speech and trying to make it as good as possible. And obviously, I'm looking forward to going there and meeting as many of you people as possible, because you guys are all great and have kept me at least some part involved in this, even if I haven't been making videos. But yeah, so apart from a general thanks to everybody, I don't really have anything else to add.
Is there anybody specific that you're looking forward to meeting at the ICMI?
Firstly, pretty much every speaker, because most of the speakers are people who I've already been following for quite some time. But beyond that, I think just anyone who has ever bothered to watch one of my videos so I could actually say thanks, because, you know, I didn't think they were that good when I started making them. I still don't think they're that good, and people seem to quite like them.
Well, I think it's the hair.
Well, the hair has undergone massive changes. I was bald for a while.
Really?
Yeah, a mate bet me in December that I wouldn't shave my head, so I did. So I was bald until sort of early March-ish.
Oh, wow.
I don't care about the hair. I've never cared about the hair.
Thank God for that. I wish people would just stop talking about the hair. Oh, flick it. Oh, don't flick it. Oh, I don't care.
Well, yeah, it's the brain that matters. And speaking of, meeting up at the ICMI in London and stuff, there's something that I want to ask. I've always wanted to try mead. Can you get mead there? Because that's what I want to try. I heard it's
not,
quite tasty.
It's not a regular. You wouldn't just go down to your local for a pint of mead, but I'm sure we can find you a London pub that serves mead.
I want mead. And honey jack. Can we get that?
Booze made from honey. You might as well drink honey jack.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. I guess it's not much of a difference. All right. So now it's time for us to close the show. No, and Clark says I can find mead here in Chicago. I have not been able to find it. And I have looked. I don't know. If you know where it is, Clark, let me know, because then I'll go get some to share with my wench.
Drink from the skulls of your enemies.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, yeah. So I'm gonna let you guys go, and I want to thank you, Josh, for taking the time to come on.
Yeah, anytime. Sorry for taking up all of the airtime with my voice.
No, that's the point.
Discussion that people in the chat didn't want to hear.
No. That was the point. And I look forward to seeing your videos on Brexit, because I know you're gonna make them. And the ones about talking to people about, how to talk to people about men's issues without turning their brains off by saying trigger words. We look forward to seeing those as well. And I want to thank Mike and Allison for coming on with me and talking about statues with big feet. And I want to thank the chat, especially Spinosauruskin, That Guy T, MC Clark, Nayla, Sock Puppet, Bearing, and all the other people that I didn't mention. I love you guys too. And
the toes.
Yes, and the toes. And NC Clark asked me a question. I want to answer. She asked it earlier, and I'm just going to say this because it's absolutely true as far as I know. There's a sculpture in Chicago that is hideous looking, really creepy, and it was made by Picasso. It's actually one of our famous landmarks. It looks like a giant violin with a man's face or something. And I was asked, what is it supposed to be? The answer is, it's Picasso's wife. That's what it is.
Jesus. That's terrifying. Picasso's wife, which looks like a violin with a man's face on it. I mean,
it looks
the
really
man was
weird.
an artist, but there's some questions to ask, isn't there?
That's Picasso's wife or somebody he was banging, but it is a woman's face, and many have speculated that it's his wife. So that's art.
Yeah.
For you.
There's that.
That's what that is. So anyway. Huh?
It's all inner beauty.
It's definitely inner beauty. Although the Picasso thing is relatively hollow, so I don't know what that's supposed to say. But she's got nothing on the inside as well.
Nothing. I don't know. There's some meaningful quote that you can find about, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. All right. Well, thank you again. And next week we should be getting Janice Fiamengo.
Ooh.
So yes, I look forward to that very much.
For that, then.
Yeah. And, we'll talk to you guys next time. Thank you and have a good one. Leave us a comment. Share the video. Get
Thanks
us
so
to
much
the
for having
UK. I wanna go to the really cheesy tourist things that Mike was saying we should not do because everyone does, like going to the what was it, Stonehenge?
Don't go to Stonehenge.
Don't bother doing this.
Garbage.
Stones in the field, man.
Yeah. Don't go to Stonehenge. The Ferris wheel is just big and slow, and who gives a shit?
Yeah,
And
it's
everybody's taking pictures on Abbey Road, and they're doing it wrong. So don't do any of those things.
Yeah.
Although we'll probably end up doing those things. All right.